would really affect the people that you know and love. Like, that's the other part too. Like, I feel like there's also more people on Earth now. Is what it is. I guess we're going live, aren't we? Welcome everybody to the NFL Matchup Show, Week 13, presented by Prize Picks everywhere. I'm Eric Lindquist, excited to be filling in for Lofty here. Hit that like button, subscribe button, and notification bell as we get going. Goes a long way for us here on the channel, goes a long way on this show, goes a long way for you guys too. When you hit the subscribe, you become a prize, whatever great stuff goes live here. Man, I get to hang out with my guy. I've filled in one other time this season, but I get to hang out with half the law firm and my favorite part of the law firm, because Matt Kajeski doesn't listen to me. Let's be serious. Matt Savoca at Draftaholic on the Twitters.com. How you doing, my dude?
I'm doing really well. Excited to dig into Week 13. Lofty, wherever you are, we miss you, bud, but really happy you're here, man. I know we have a great slate. Finally, some really, really solid totals, some really high implied totals, and as you were talking about before the show, before we got on a philosophical conversation, in pure matchups form, there are some low total games that actually have some intriguing players that we can actually dig into. So usually Lofty says something here where, at the end here, because we go highest total, lowest total, we're going to really fly through the last ones. We may actually stop and pause, smell the roses on some of those. So let's dig in, grab your substances of choice. I got my coffee. I know you're on the West Coast, man. I hope you're ready to roll because this will be a fun one.
Oh my God, I was up so early. But here's the thing. I don't normally, just because of the way my schedule works out with NBA, it's like NBA all the time. I don't get to always dig into the NFL slate the way that I want to earlier in the week. So it's very, very nice to kind of feel prepped and ready to go for the first time on a Thursday in a really, really long time. Normally Saturday, I feel like I'm playing catch up. Sunday, ready to rock on NFL Live before lock. But this is always very nice. I felt like I had probably my best NFL week the week that we did. It was like week 7 or week 8. I can't remember, but it was definitely the most prepared I've ever felt. You get it done. Again, you guys already know that if you're there in the chat. Good to see you all. Before we start this is a carryover from last night from the NBA Live Before Lock show with Josh Engelman. We were talking about it before the show. I got to do it. Matt Savoca, you get 24 hours to go back in time. You get a 24-hour day at any period in time between now and eternity. You can go back in time to it. Which do you pick?
You get a 24-hour time period. So the stipulations are you can't actually die. You can't perish.
You can't die.
The things that you
can experience, and the things you do carry
have
on
implications
for
on the future.
If you die in that time period, you just kind of like come back to life.
Okay, but other people can.
Correct.
I mean, you got to do it before some mass fatality event. We were kind of debating which one, how you would do it, how you would debate it. Could you go back in time and, stop some world atrocities? But also you have to consider your own personal family. Is definitely something having to do with what happened in the 1930s and 40s, probably some moment in Europe trying to go back there and stop things from going there.
This is why I like you, Matt Savoca. I asked you before the show, you thought about it a little bit, and I could tell where you were going. We kind of went to the exact same place, which I don't know what it says about us. You know what it means? It's that we're givers. We're not takers. We're not selfishly going out and trying to have our own vested interests taken care of. We're there trying to inspire change. Whereas Tyler Zander, producer of the show, hand up over there, he's going to just do his own thing. That's what we've learned, right? Yeah.
These are things we know. I mean, I certainly have some curiosities where if I had a round 2, I would go for it. And that's sort of like, sorry to go to like pop culture here, but that's what they explored at the very end of one of the Avengers movies, right? Where a certain, I don't want to spoiler it too much, where a certain superhero who spent his entire life trying to save every single person he can goes back in time and chooses to just live out a normal life.
6 seconds.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that scene.
Yeah, and they just find him over by the river. People on podcasts like, have no idea what the face I made, but it was the old man at the river face.
Well, let's give the podcast people some information. Then I think that's all right as well on the YouTubes. Once again, hit the like button. Good to see people rolling into chat. Our guys, Larry C, Stephen Leibowitz, a lot of people that I see every day on all the shows. Good to have you guys hanging out, talking a little NFL. Let's get to it here. Stokastic Week 13 matchup show is officially live. We start position. Well, we go, I almost said position by position because that's what I always do on these shows, but we are going highest total to lowest total, just like you guys always do on Thursdays. We start with the Kansas City game, 2-point favorites at Cincinnati in this one. And you get two quarterbacks that I think are going to be popular this week. Looks like they're going to be popular in the projections. And I will say, Patrick Mahomes at 5% is a little absurd. You get the 7% Joe Burrow, but let's just say that on Thursday, I can guarantee you, as this total sits at 53 and we look around the rest of the board, I can guarantee you they're going to end up more popular purely because there are pass catching options in Travis Kelce and perhaps the reemergence here of Jamar Chase into that Cincinnati lineup. But from a quarterback perspective, Joe Burrow or Patrick Mahomes if you had to roster one?
If I had to roster one in a tournament, whenever I'm getting 5% own Patrick Mahomes, I'm trying my very, very best to get there. It's a clear pay up to be contrarian option. We've got a projection right at salary-based expectations. We've got Mahomes playing it at the same efficient rate we know and love, 4.4 fantasy points over expected per game over the last 6 weeks, while being number one in expected fantasy points per game. So the opportunity value is elite. The scoring is elite. The only problem, of course, is where does the value open up in the rest of your roster? Because 8,300 for a quarterback, 17% of your total salary cap on DraftKings, it's just tough to swallow. Anytime you have Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase most likely, and probably Joe Mixon in a game environment, scoring is probably going to happen. Pace and passing, I'm not concerned about. But ultimately, Patrick Mahomes in a vacuum is arguably the highest ceiling overall fantasy player on the entire slate.
Feel that way too. If you have him in year long, you're feeling pretty good about your life. That's for sure. Going against Cincinnati, this is just the makings of a kind of shootout. And Joe Burrow, you're saving 1,400 going his direction. You get Jamar Chase back, but are we automatically going to get all the snaps immediately from Jamar Chase? I'm not completely positive about it. We saw this last week with Kansas City, only 38% of the snaps with Juju Smith-Schuster. Thursday's practice reports are going to be very, very important today. Kadarius Toney, Jamar Chase, lots of guys from this game. Jamar Chase was limited yesterday. Think he's going to be good enough to go here, but if he doesn't get the full allocation of work, maybe the stacking options become a little bit neutralized here. And I'm with you. I think Patrick Mahomes just has such a clear path. Patrick Mahomes to Travis Kelce, we all know that combination kind of worked out a little bit in the past.
Yeah, it's pretty good. On the Chiefs side, we have arguably more opportunity consolidation with this team than we ever have. I thought it was going to be better because I kind of said the same thing last week. But with Juju Smith-Schuster kind of limited more than I thought in that game, we saw more of these tertiary options, your Marcus Valdes-Scantlings, your Justin Watsons, even Jody Fortson and Noah Gray playing more. Ultimately, I still think you're trying to get to that super expensive stack of Kelce and Mahomes and then trying to make value plays elsewhere. Everybody else, including Juju at this point, I think have projections sort of right at salary-based expectations. No one really sticking out. I will say Sky Moore at 3,100 is a good way to get low salary access to this game, but we don't have high expectations for him. This is still like a player when he has 4 or 5 targets. We're pretty happy there. But highest total game on the slate, Patrick Mahomes is his quarterback, under 3% ownership, 3,100. Those are the types of tournament plays, especially in large field, where I say, okay, that makes sense, even if they end up getting like a 2 or a 3 at the end of the day.
You know what's kind of wild is I think I actually prefer Watson at this point. And I will say he was never on my radar at any point preseason, not at any point. I didn't think it mattered, but he played a lot of snaps, sure. Only 16 for Sky Moore there. What did he have? 46% of the offensive snaps there. I think it was 16 routes that he ran there in that spot, but Watson's on the field a lot. As Juju gets a little bit healthier, we got to be expecting that snap share to come down a little bit. But before we get completely to the wide receivers here, there is one running back that I took some shots on last week. He got a ton of work, 22 carries, got one target. I'm, of course, talking about Isaiah Pacheco for this road Kansas City team. I don't know what that ownership's going to come in at. I feel like running back is kind of open and up in the air a little bit more so than it was last week. You basically had very pronounced chalk. We got to be paying attention very, very closely to what happens with Josh Jacobs coming off of infinity fantasy points. But I expect him to play. I expect them to just kind of rest him all week here. But is Pacheco a decent enough tournament option for you on Sunday?
I think so. If Jerick McKinnon is still banged up, he didn't practice yesterday. We'll see what he looks like today at the Thursday practice reports. We know CEH is on injured reserve, and the only other player in that backfield is Ronald Jones. Pacheco should get a lot of work here. So his median projection looks okay. Running back 23 right now in our median projections. At 5,700, that makes him a you can play him type of play. But the ownership, again, in this high total game, is what really intrigues me here. Right now, it's under 3%. I think that is going to move up as the injuries start to pile up and people realize what this backfield is looking like as we head to Sunday. But I still think Pacheco is just the running game of the Chiefs is a solid tournament way to flip your lineup. Obviously, I like the passing game options better. We know who those players are that we like the best, but Pacheco is going to get the work you need, again, in a high total game.
If you had to make me guess, I don't think Jerick McKinnon plays come Sunday. It's a hamstring strain. We have Kadarius Toney also hamstring, little beat up. They're starting to get a little bit healthier here. Juju will see it. MVS is still healthy. That's cool. I can't.
He's there. He's 4,100.
We'll talk about. I don't want to do MVS yet because I don't want to be in a bad mood right off the beginning of the show. I want to talk Joe Mixon because concussion, return to practice. This is a dude that I anticipate having a lot of come Sunday. I think he just reestablishes himself as the number one immediately. He hasn't been as good on the ground, but the thing is, he doesn't necessarily have to be here. Kansas City already fifth in terms of rushing defense, 21st in passing defense, 233.5 passing yards per game. 7,100 is a very palatable price for Joe Mixon in this spot. I think you could be getting enough receiving game volume to more than justify that tag. Would be happy stacking him in tournaments. How are you feeling about Joe Mixon returning from the concussion?
So I'm a little bit more wary than you. And I also think that Samaje Perine may have played himself into more snaps. That's really how I feel when he's had a 30 I know they're not looking at fantasy points, the Bengals front office, but 30 fantasy points, 82 total yards, catching all 4 targets, 11 carries, turning in 3 touchdowns in week 11, and then following that up with 93 total yards, 7 targets, 4 receptions, and 17 carries as well. He was the 10th highest scoring running back in fantasy last week. Look, I think Mixon's going to play. I still think Mixon probably gets close to that 75% snap share we saw 3 weeks ago when he was healthier. But I do think it could go down to a 65, even lower percentage. And now we're seeing 7 target games from Perine. What if he's being spelled on third downs for Perine? So I think there is some risk of ruin here. Price is right. Projection is okay. I still like the passing game better.
Yeah, I'm totally hear you, but hear me out on this a little bit too. Josh Jacobs dinged up. I think he's going to be playing. He'll be fine. We've seen him every time he's been on the field play a bazillion snaps. Travis Etienne, foot injury. Aaron Jones coming off of being dinged up as well here in a more of a timeshare than just about anybody. It was like a shin situation that he had. He was limited to practice yesterday. Those are 3 of your 5 highest owned running backs. There's a lot of variance. There's just a lot of uncertainty, if you will, here at the top end. And we don't have any pronounced chalk. I think Joe Mixon being the 7th highest owned running back makes sense. He's at 12%, but he has a discount off of Jacobs, off of Eckler, a little bit more than Aaron Jones and Travis Etienne. But maybe Perine did play himself into a little bit of a role. You don't even have to think about him at 6K. That's not even a real tag with Joe Mixon back. I'm glad that they do that though, because if Mixon were to be out, obviously you would have a broken kind of tag on Perine there. But 7,100 doesn't feel all that expensive and all that cost prohibitive on this kind of a slate.
I totally agree. And if you look at our big board tool, which combines projected ownership, projection, ceiling projection as well, We have Joe Mixon among the top 9 running backs on this slate on DraftKings. We have an expected ownership north of 10%. This is a good play. I'm just kind of poking holes in it because I do think they might preserve him and add P. Ryan to a slightly higher snap share than before.
Valid. Totally valid. Let's talk pass catchers, because I think that that's really the fun part in tournaments about this game, about what we're looking at from here. And T. Higgins, only 10.6% ownership. He was north of 20 just about everywhere last week, as he should have been. But now the tag's gone up, and you're adding Jamar Chase into the fray. Weird to say, though, I think that makes him a little bit more interesting for tournaments, just because people won't go there nearly as frequently. And it's not like you lose that upside. There are so many instances over the course of the last 2 years where 2 of the 3 being Higgins, Boyd, Chase, there's massive ceiling games. You know, you're probably double stacking Joe Burrow every single time. There's not really any rush capability there. So how are you feeling about T. Higgins with the inflated tag but reduced ownership?
I think it's going to be really interesting. We love pay up to beat contrarian options, especially when the player is good and the matchup is good, and especially if the quarterback is good. We haven't seen Joe Burrow's absolute smash games all that much this season, but we still have him 3rd highest in our projections this week, way above salary-based expectations. And that overperformance, hopefully, is going to trickle down to these pass catchers. So I'm stacking them up with any of these top 3 options, including Chase, who's pretty expensive. 7,900 is the 4th highest salary wide receiver, but Higgins, I think he's a great option when you're looking at maybe 10% ownership. I don't actually think it ends up being that high, because I think people are going to, especially if Chase is active, they're going to go and try to chase those 35, 40-point games you can get out of Jamar Chase. But I think T. Higgins is really a really good play.
Knew you were going to do it. It's alliteration. It's the crossword puzzle guy in you.
It is. It is. I didn't even realize it as I said it.
It's okay. It's beautiful. Tyler Boyd, don't really have to think about it as much, I think. He's still somebody who, if he showed up in 150 and you had a share or two to kind of round it out, sweet. But Hayden Hurst with 9 targets. Hello. How you doing? 3,500 was popular then. He'll be less popular now. Travis Kelce, obviously the most popular tight end on the board, but at 7,900, you better be getting everything you got out of him here. He's just running away with the position in year long. He's running away with the position this week. Njoku sitting there. I mean, we'll get to that one. I'm pretty excited about what could happen for David Njoku, especially after he got basically complete freedom. He was able to just do whatever he wanted to. Tons of snap share. They Unchained. David Njoku Unchained is fun, but Travis Kelce confirmed very good at football.
It's arguably one of the more valuable seasons we've ever seen from a tight end compared to the rest of the position. He's just smashing. And I'm in a dynasty league where the first place team, kind of just casually hit me up at the trade deadline. Like, what's it going to take for Travis Kelce? And I'm out of it in this league. And I said, look, this player is stomping the league in a way that we don't see players do, especially at the tight end position. What does that mean for this week? Well, the adjusted fantasy points allowed from the Bengals' perspective on defense, it's slightly below league average. This guy is as far above league average as one can get at his position. It can go wrong at 7,900, and stacking him up with Mahomes is really tough. I still think that Kelce is a phenomenal play. Once the players get on the field, the salary you paid for them does not matter at all. And I think you're going to be very happy most of the times. When you sim out this game a ton of times, there's a huge amount of ceiling performances from Kelce, as you would expect.
I do think they're very, very easy to get to. Kansas City in general is pretty easy to get to on FanDuel. That's why we're seeing them with the 2nd highest top stack percentage there in the Stokastic NFL DFS stacks tool. So check that out. Feels pretty easy to do. This Jamar Chase thing is going to be very, very frustrating, though, I think, for this football game. If he's limited in any way, shape, or form, it just takes so much ceiling for him to get there. Going to take a couple of just huge plays for him to get there at 7,900. I'm more inclined to take the T. Higgins shot. We'll see what the field decides to end up doing. Hayden Hurst, I think, a decent enough run back option too, but we got to talk about it because I'm on a show and I don't want to. But MVS just continues to run a lot of run a lot of routes and do everything that I anticipated him to do. And he's down to 4,100, and I am a broken man.
You just got to keep going. You just got to keep riding the
I
ride at this point. Hey, look, the 5 targets he had last week were the most he's seen in a game since week 5. Excellent. Caught 4 of them, 56 receiving yards on 56 air yards, by the way. We're still talking about less than 10 fantasy points. I'm intrigued. 58% snap share is a little bit of a misnomer because, as you said, he's had a 76% route rate or higher over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Look, if Juju comes in, it's possible that MVS is one of those players who gets snaps in pass dropbacks taken away from him. But in large field, because of the game environment, you can absolutely put him on your list.
So it's the highest total on the board. Again, popular. I'm assuming that you're going to see Travis Kelce be the highest owned tight end this week. I'm assuming that you're going to see exposure to this game in tournaments, but not going to be as popular as the next one that we get to. Anything else you want to talk about with Kansas City and Cincinnati here?
Nah, we really covered it. Hurst is a good play as well. As you mentioned, that target share continues to remain high. Even with Chase in the lineup, I'll go to him a couple times.
Well, let's get to the nuts, because this game feels like it's going to be nuts. Yeah, I think it is the nuts as it stands right now. Boy, does our top stacks tool echo that sentiment. It's Coors Field. We've got Jacksonville heading into Detroit. 51.5 total here in this one. Jacksonville coming off the heels of a phenomenal win, a much needed win. Let's hug Mr. Peterson and call him our daddy win. Kind of wild to see the difference between him and Urban Meyer. What a change here in Trevor Lawrence, that's for sure. Going to be exciting going forward, even if they're not really relevant this year. Same thing with Detroit on the other side. This is the battle of two coaches, two beloved coaches, if you will, but this is by far the best game environment that Jacksonville's been in this season. Detroit on the other side, they just continue to have these track meet games. Let's start at the quarterback position here. Kind of the same thing I brought up before, and I think we can bring up the player compare tool when we talk about the difference between these two, but Detroit, the number one stack on the board here on DraftKings right now. Jacksonville, 4th on the board. They have tons of pass catching options, specifically one guy in Amon-Ra St. Brown that's just unfadable for this entire game. But if you had to pick Trevor Lawrence or Jared Goff, considering Trevor Lawrence coming in double the ownership of Jared Goff right now, which one would you want to play in a single entry lineup?
In a single entry lineup, I'm going to take Trevor Lawrence. I can't believe I'm saying it because I know we're trying to. Goff has potential here. But look, we've got Trevor Lawrence as a top 7 quarterback in terms of median projection, and the game environment implies a massive ceiling for either player. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown on the other side. We're going to get there in a minute. And Goff does have, like you said, almost half the ownership. But we got him at QB 14 as a projection, and I'm going to stick to the projections and say Lawrence looks better.
Yeah, I think Lawrence, in terms of projection, looks better. If you get me Jared Goff, we're going to see Amon-Ra St. Brown as the most popular wide receiver on the board this week. I don't think it's going to be really all that close. Right now, we have nearly a 5% difference between him and Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson up to 5,300 here. Maybe Mike White is the second coming of Christ, and we just don't know it yet. But I'm going to guess maybe not. Zay Jones and Christian Kirk, that's kind of the difficult thing for me, is Zay Jones out of the middle of nowhere the last 2 weeks. 10 and 14 targets. Yeah, he gives you a great cheap option for cash games if you need it there. Kirk, I have no qualms about one bad game. He still had 9 targets. He's been targeted at the highest rate of anybody else on this team. So there you go. Christian Kirk makes sense, but am I going to want to go along for the ride on a bunch of double stacks with those exact combinations? Because I can tell you, Evan Ingram feels very, very shaky to me, considering he's going to be popular. He's just 3K. He's the 8th most popular tight end. That's popular when you're Evan Ingram. I don't know a unique way to stack him up unless I'm just going to throw everybody else there together. Jared Goff, if I go single, I could add, I don't want to talk about Brock Wright too much, but he's 2,800. I'd be all right doing something weird there. DJ Chark's on the field a bunch. Josh Reynolds, I don't think that snap share is going to go up. Khalif Raymond seems to be ahead of him, but I have some unique ways to put Jared Goff together where it feels so straightforward for Trevor Lawrence.
It really does. And we could get some value opening up on this team if Travis Etienne ultimately can't go. Could be JaMychal Hasty getting more work, even if Travis Etienne can go. It's really scary because it's a foot sprain, and we know he missed that whole first season with foot problems. You mentioned Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. The target share is just part of the equation here. If you look at weighted opportunity, which factors in air yards, and expected fantasy points, which factors in when it happened, the game situation, when those targets and air yards occurred, Christian Kirk and Zay Jones are both in the top 13 wide receivers on this entire slate. Christian Kirk in the top 7. So just from an opportunity value standpoint, they're way ahead of salary-based expectations. And as we mentioned, this looks like it could be a track meet. I like both of these wide receivers on the Jacksonville side, and we keep alluding to it, but Amon-Ra looks like one of the best plays overall on the slate. So many wide receiver options. I'm not sure why you need to go to Evan Ingram, whose expected fantasy points is barely inside the top 15 tight ends.
It just feels like there's a lot of overlap with what you're going to do with Trevor Lawrence. And hey, maybe it can be like last week where you can go Lawrence to Zay and that's it. But I feel like if I'm going to get what I want out of this game, I'm going to be double stacking it. I'm going to run it back with St. Brown, and that's going to have 4 lineup positions that are basically identical to everybody else if I'm playing single entry, if I'm trying to stack up this game. And this game does feel like the absolute nuts. So I think Goff maybe just reduces a little bit of my ownership. Trevor Lawrence, I mean, he played awesome last week. Can he keep it going? We shall see. It makes sense against Detroit to take that shot. This is not a good defense in any way, shape, or form. But 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. We're seeing Trevor Lawrence start to have that number 1 pick billing. We're starting to see it a little bit. Zach Wilson, rip to that. Not a number 1 pick, though, I suppose. Let's talk running game here because this is really, really shaky to me. Travis Etienne, you talked about it. The Liz Frank injury that he had last season. Now it's a foot issue, but they did say that they were exercising caution. They went to JaMychal Hasty there in that entire second half, and boy, did he play good. I still think Etienne ends up getting all the work for the most part. I can't imagine that if he ends up playing and being active for this one, which it just every indication is that he's just fine, he's going to be one of the most popular running backs. I think he will be one of my highest owned running backs in that kind of an event. Detroit, so bad. How are you feeling about him? I guess you kind of talked about it briefly there, but give people the 411 on ATN on your stand there.
So our projection is ahead of salary-based expectations, and so I'll add that our tools like him at the top. That matters to me. When in doubt, you can go with the tools. But ultimately, Travis Etienne, injury scares me. And Detroit, say what you will about this defense, but they're kind of figuring things out against the running backs more than any other position. They are 6th best in the NFL, aka toughest to go up against in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs, but still 31st in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. I have my dishwasher making a high-pitched noise. Can you hear it?
That's what it was.
I have no idea what's going on. No, guys, I have to shoot it to you while this stops. My goodness.
Yeah, go ahead. So Travis Etienne, it's just, if he's going to be getting the workload that we've seen constantly here, maybe JaMychal Hasty played himself into a role. That would be ridiculous. Honestly, it really, really would be. But perhaps maybe Etienne's a little bit limited. I won't be playing Hasty at 5K. I can tell you that much. Etienne will definitely be overinvested if he were to be 17%. I could see him getting really steamed up. As I said before, we don't have cheap running backs the way that we did last week, at least not yet. And he's at 6,400. I like him. Everybody's going to, hopefully like him just in terms of stomaching it more than David Montgomery for 200 more, even though Montgomery currently pulling more ownership. We'll see. But ATM makes all the sense in all the land. You know what doesn't make sense to me? Jamal Williams. How does this dude keep getting in the box every freaking game? It is going to make me bang my head against a wall. Up to 13 touchdowns on the season. He's had 5 in his last 3. Why can't it be DeAndre Swift's season?
It can be DeAndre Swift's season, and he's off the injury report, and it's all systems go. I think this is one of the best players in the league when he's healthy, and I think Jamal Williams has gotten lucky with variance. That's really what it is. I think it's really that simple. In expected fantasy points, it doesn't look that good. In current efficiency, fantasy points above or below expectation. It doesn't look that good. And Justin Jackson's getting more snap share. There are very rational, reasonable reasons to say no DeAndre Swift. I still think he's a great player against a pretty mediocre defense who's 20th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position, actually significantly worse than Detroit. And you're a hero for working through that while we got the dishwasher stuff.
Hey, I tried. I got it covered, baby. It was more of like is he back yet? There he is. We're ready. I will say, if you're going to have this game just fall into absolute by the wayside, I feel like DeAndre Swift at 5,600 is actually in play. I don't feel good about it. It's not something that you're going to feel excited about, but he has the passing game role. We've seen Jamal Charles, look at me. Jamal Williams just absolutely be between the tackles, been rushing it a ton, but 34% of the offensive snaps against Buffalo there, 8 targets. Maybe we can see him get north of 40, 50%. He's at 5,600. And as you said before, one of the best backs in football. This is in a large field only YOLO type play.
Yes.
But he is so damn good. And I hate that as analysis because it doesn't really matter for fantasy, but it kind of does.
It's sort of like the antonym of the undrafted free agent stink. When you're a high draft pick from an SEC school and you flashed in certain spots, even after injuries pile up, even after a couple of years, I'm still putting him on my list of I cannot be surprised by him if he scores 30. We're saying it's a low probability play. That's why his ownership is fairly rational at 2 to 3%, but it's pretty easy to be over the field when it's just 2 to 3% expected ownership.
All right. I think we talked about the running backs enough in depth there. Also, I just responded to GC Samurai. Jamal Williams can catch. Yeah, not when Swift's active. 3 straight games, 0 targets. 4 straight games, 0 targets. There you go. That's not ideal.
He needs those red zone and goal line touches.
Or he needs 13 touchdowns on the year for a bad football team. Doesn't seem fair, but also doesn't seem fair how good Amon-Ra St. Brown, the sun god himself, is projecting out so well here, projecting out so well everywhere. You talk about this top stack tool, and there's a reason that they're at the top of it. It's because Goff to St. Brown is a no-brainer. Now, I will want to bring somebody along for the ride more than likely in some of those Goff stacks, but coming in with half the ownership of Trevor Lawrence, even as a run back for Jacksonville, you're bringing St. Brown along for the ride a lot. But with Goff to St. Brown, you could basically see 2 or 3 touchdowns, massive upside just from him. Maybe you don't need everybody else. Maybe you don't. But talk to me about Amon-Ra St. Brown and why he's the top projected wide receiver on the board, because it's pretty obvious you should have some shares.
Yeah. Pretty easy here. The Jaguars defense against the pass, 22nd in the NFL, so bottom 11 in the league. Amon-Ra, clearly the number 1 option for this team in expected fantasy points per game over the last 6 weeks. So a lot of those weeks, including since TJ Hawkinson's departure. He's up at over 12 expected fantasy points per game. The projection for him, the highest ahead of salary-based expectation that we see for any wide receiver in the top 12. We actually have him flirting with the wide receiver 1, again, just in terms of median projection. And so the ownership actually makes sense here for me. He's a great play. If we're really going to see him approach 20 to 25% expected ownership, you can always say, hey, I'm starting my lineup by fading this guy because he's that popular. But this is a situation that makes sense. You can stack him with either quarterback. And as we mentioned, there are actually some really interesting running back and wide receiver options to make your stacks more creative. They are number 1 in our top stacks rating metric, even though they're the 5th highest probability of being the top stack. So that means they're great value.
Out of 120 wide receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown 3rd amongst all at the position, according to PFF. We got to pay attention to a little bit of news here. Penny Sewell on the right end of on the right tackle spot. I want to make sure Jared Goff is protected. They have a really good offensive line there in Detroit. A lot better than I think people probably give them credit for. Probably one of the highlights of this football team. That's why you're seeing Goff be effective. Pretty much any quarterback of this kind of a level can be effective if you have an offensive line that can be piecemealed together. How about that? Piecemeal, word of the day. Put
Love
that
it.
in your crossword.
I love it. Put it in.
Hi, Tyler Zander. How are you? He's confused. He's watching soccer. Let's be dead serious. Round it out for me. Anything else here? Because again, Brock Wright, Evan Ingram, if they show up with your quarterback, sweet, good times. But no way I'm going to prioritize either of them here, especially Evan Ingram, who might just get steamed up because Trevor Lawrence is so damn popular.
Khalif Raymond is in my you can play him tier, and Marvin Jones in very, very large field tournaments. Also just attaching yourself to this game environment. We've pretty much mentioned it all the way through. Look, guys, I see chat going off about our DeAndre Swift takes. We're trying to galaxy brain it here on Thursday. Obviously, Jamal Williams is getting the usage, has had touchdown variance on his side, and there's a third running back in the fold. That's the baseline. We still think Swift has some upside. He can't come out of nowhere now that we've talked about it. It's still a low probability play, as we mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, people have been playing Aaron Jones at 7K, even though he's like in a 60-40 timeshare. Like, what if Swift plays 45% of the snaps? What if he continually is getting healthier and we start seeing some upward trend? He's already the guy getting all the receiving volume. So on DraftKings, sub 6K for a guy who could bring one to the house. I just think there's a lot more running backs in play this week than what there, for damn sure, than what there were last week.
100%. It's still kind of murky waters at this point Thursday. I think we're going to have more value open up, but there's already more available to us.
All right. Well, we worked a lot on those first two games. I think that that's naturally how this show should work, just because, once again, the most intriguing games first. Love this format. Love it all. We still got just less than an hour. Hit that like button. Over 200 of you guys now hanging out here talking a little NFL on Thursday. If you're in a legal betting state, here's what you got to do, though, because this is free money. This is free money on the table. The World Cup is going on. I know that our friend Tyler Zander down there is paying close attention to it. Canada down 2-1 right now. They should stick to hockey. That's kind of what we're learning. We've got Belgium. That's still 0-0, right? 0-0 Croatia, Belgium. So great. Lots of things in the World Cup coming up Saturday. If you love your country, just saying, United States of America is playing super early against the Netherlands. You'll want to get $10 in on that right now at BetMGM. Why? Well, not because you necessarily think the United States needs to win, but it gives you a nice rooting interest. But you're going to get $200 free put in your account when the goal is scored. Now, a goal must be scored in this round. At some point, it will be, a 1-0 by PKs at the very end of it. If it goes past the extra 30 minutes, you can have 120 minutes of 0-0 soccer, and you will still get yourself $200 free when you sign up now. Go put $10 on the USA, sign up in the video description box below here with BetMGM, and have a rooting interest just in the United States of America, along with an opportunity to get $200 free to utilize for Sunday. I want you guys to take advantage of it. This offer is going away over the weekend. So get that $10 in on the United States, get yourself $200 free for NFL bets, and start winning some money. So thank you to BetMGM for this opportunity for all of y'all. All righty, my friend, we go to the Chargers and Vegas here. 1-point favorite on the road here, Las Vegas, and I would normally start with quarterbacks, but why would we start with quarterbacks when one of the best games in the history of the NFL was just put down by one Josh Jacobs? He's limited in practice Wednesday. He's going to be limited all week. They're not going to make him do anything. Why? Because he put the team on his back, though.
I mean, awesome performance. I still think breakaway runs like that at the end of games that completely burst your fantasy points to, historic levels. He got to the point where we're talking about that game in the same conversation as the classic Jamal Charles 5 touchdown games, the Doug Martin game when he was a rookie. Like, it was epic. 6 receptions was the most he's had all year. 33 carries, the most he's had all year. 303 total yards is ridiculous. He's probably never going to have a game like that again, but he's probably going to get the work if he's healthy. He's a solid play, of course, because he is the thing that's working on a rather broken team that's still just 4-7 and needing all sorts of randomness and miracles to get wins here. As Lofty has said on previous shows here, the Raiders are up there for the teams trying to lose games most of the time. Chargering is the verb we look for around here, even though the Chargers have been less like that team of late. Josh Jacobs is a great play. We've got him running back 1 if healthy in terms of median projection, but don't rule out that running back on the other side, man. All he needs is a couple of receptions to go his way, a couple of goal line carries. He doesn't even need all the work. Eckler's awesome too.
Yeah, the Jamal Charles game. The thing about that one, he only had 20 yards rushing. He had 5 touchdowns, over 150 on through the air. I remember that was kind of the main feature of that one.
That might be
Mainly
my
'cause people-
favorite running back highlight video ever. He just glides to 50 fantasy points.
It was dumb. It was stupid.
Doesn't
He's
get
so
touched.
good. I remember those days. When did you start playing fantasy football? For me, it was right around that time.
That was the first time. Like, I had fantasy leagues and fantasy teams when I was a kid, but like for no money and stuff like that. And this was pre all the really DFS commercials and things like that. But it was a couple years prior where my like group of guys started to take it seriously, put some money down. So I think 11, 12, 13 were the years that I really started getting into it.
Yeah, those were good days. Back when we were trading cards with our friends and no cares in the world.
Now we just do it digitally.
Yeah. Oh my God, I'm a sick person. I can't go down that road right now. Can't even talk about it. If anybody is looking for a Deontay Johnson Rainmakers card, hit up your boy. Hit up your boy. We've got the Chargers, Vegas in this one, and the quarterback position. Derek Carr, second most popular quarterback on the board this week, which is a little surprising to me. We haven't seen all of the expressed upside. He's just been consistently good the last couple of weeks, even if it hasn't necessarily resulted in winning all the time. But you have a pretty clear-cut back in Josh Jacobs. You have a pretty clear-cut wide receiver. That guy, Devontae Adams, is still pretty good at the old footballs. Yeah. How are you feeling about him as a stacking option going up against this very underperforming Chargers defense?
They are underperforming, but I think popular Derek Carr is not something I need to be a part of because he needs touchdown passes to really hit. And yes, it's been good. 2, 2, 2, and 3 passing touchdowns over his last 4 weeks. The minute that goes down to 1, we're having a problem because he's got no rushing upside and he's rarely throwing for a huge amount of yards. Yes, he can top 300, but we're not talking about Mahomes level 350s coming from Derek Carr in this offense. They're 7th in our top stacked rating and 7th in top stacked probability, meaning they're fine. But I honestly think in terms of pure probability, I'm with our tools that the Chargers have a better chance of being the top stack on this slate. I like individual pieces here. I'm fine with Carr, but not really when he's popular. I'd rather go to one of the star players in Jacobs or Adams and then probably leave the rest of this team, if I'm being completely honest.
I'm with you. I think Justin Herbert is the obvious clear-cut option that I want to get to if I'm going to be stacking up anything in this game. And there is a little bit of uncertainty. I can't talk about the Jamar Chase thing and not at least talk about the fact that Mike Williams is practicing now. Or that we'll see today. Today will paint a much clearer picture about what we're working with here. He didn't practice on Wednesday, but it did sound, I saw the report that he was trending up. We'll see if he ends up practicing this week here. As it stands right now, we've got him in the projections. So that would really add a wrench to everything involved. I would like him to be out, and then you can go Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer, DeAndre Carter in some capacity. DeAndre Carter, somebody who's under 4K. There aren't a ton of those this time of year here at the wide receiver position. I like Justin Herbert a lot for tournaments. So any pushback there?
Not whatsoever. I talked about it a little bit last week on the matchups show that Herbert's production and efficiency continues to look better and better. Bless you, sir. Over the course of this offense getting Keenan Allen back. He's a wide receiver 1 that really, really matters in the NFL still. And I think he's kind of underrated because he plays that slot corner that can't dominate unless they're scoring a ton of touchdowns with it, which Allen hasn't done traditionally in his career. But we had 28 fantasy points from Justin Herbert last week. He was the 3rd highest scoring quarterback among all quarterbacks in week 12 last week. So I do think the ceiling is back for this player. We got him quarterback 2 ahead of salary-based expectations. And just talking about the quarterback, it's actually better if Williams comes back because he has more weapons to choose from. It is difficult from a stacking perspective. You can still play Eckler, by the way. But Herbert's great. I really like him at 7,200.
I love Austin Eckler. He is a man who puts fantasy football players first. He has embraced us as his own kin. He has gone on podcasts and spoken about how it's so great for the brand. He is truly a revolutionary in our industry. Do you know how many times he's rushed for over 85 yards this season? Don't look.
0.
Once.
Oh.
Against Cleveland. I mean, this is just purely a DraftKings touchdown combination. I mean, oh boy, he's 8,500. And right now in our projections, we're talking about the second most popular running back on the board behind Josh Jacobs. It's a little dicey to me. I will say, I think Keenan Allen is my preferred guy with Justin Herbert. Austin Eckler as a standalone play, I can't give any pushback to this kind of receiving volume. 15 targets, 12 targets, 12 targets, 16. Those are 4 of his last 6 weeks. But if you introduce Mike Williams back into the fray, I think that takes a little bit off the top. Maybe it makes the offense a little bit more electric. Maybe it brings up his touchdown rate a little bit, but not really feeling it. If you get everybody back here for the Chargers at 8,500, it's the second most popular back on the board.
It's definitely nerve-wracking when, once again, we're expecting 1 in 4 lineups to include Austin Eckler. And again, when a player is that popular in tournaments, you can just say, I'm starting my lineup by fading that player. But ultimately, Eckler is number 1 in expected fantasy points over the last 6 weeks because the value of a target and a goal line opportunity is so much more than any other type of opportunity, regardless of situation. And he hasn't been particularly efficient over that last 6-week period. I think that's more to do with randomness than Eckler suddenly being an inefficient player. Compare that to Josh Jacobs on the other side, who's seeing equal or even higher ownership. His expected fantasy points doesn't top 17 over the last 6 weeks. That's still top 3 among running backs on the slate, but it's a different stratosphere for Eckler in terms of opportunity value. Jacobs has been the one who is way too efficient, 5.5 fantasy points over expectation per game. So you would expect that to come down. I think there's actually some meat on the bone when it comes to Eckler here. Look, if you want to play Allen, you want to play Williams, even if you want to play Gerald Everett, who's getting more snaps now that he's back in the tight end position for them, that's fine. But I still think Eckler is a hell of a play.
Yeah, he's a hell of a play. He's the most negatively leveraged player in the boom bust tour right now, which, again, you can take that for what it is. You can always build around an Austin Eckler. If he hits a ceiling, you're just going to flat out need him. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there is such a bust potential there at this kind of a tag, at this kind of an ownership. 8,500 is expensive, and Josh Jacobs is playing all the snaps when active. We're seeing 69, 69, and 70 the last 3 for Austin Eckler. There's at least other guys getting rotated in, working around him here. Sony Michel was inactive, rip there, but Spiller and Kelly are playing just enough to make me feel as though it's just a much better bet going and playing Jacobs. Coming off of last week, I don't think it's point chasey. You and I loved Josh Jacobs for tournaments last week. Shout out us. I should have clipped that. That should have been the clip. I had 28% of the lovely human being, but yeah, it was fun. That was fun. 4%. We had him projected around 13, and we both said that seemed high, but that's what a Q tag will do. It's hard to account for people hand building. That's for damn sure. But Josh Jacobs, I just like infinitely more. But what about Davante Adams? Because this might be like the remember me type game. Everybody's talking about Josh Jacobs, rightfully so. The guy just set a nuke on Seattle up north. But you get an 8,700 Davante Adams coming off of a week where he was pretty chalky. He ended up more popular than a lot of top-end options. We've got him at 15% right now, a little bit higher round than Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson for more. A little bit higher round than Jamar Chase and A.J. Brown and Jalen Waddle for a little bit lower. But my God, does he stand out against this Chargers secondary?
For sure. Love Davante Adams. As I said, as we started this game, my preferred way to play it is just take one or both of Adams and Jacobs and leave the rest of my attachment to this game environment to Chargers players. Because I think that these two are going to command so much of the expected fantasy points, the opportunity value for this team. we're back to Devontae Adams being the one of the most reliable players in all of fantasy sports at this point, where double-digit fantasy points are happening every time he steps on the field and he doesn't have the flu. The only time other than that flu game, when he had just one reception for 3 yards, that he's had under 10 fantasy points this year in full PPR scoring or DraftKings scoring, he had 9.2 fantasy points. And the ceiling is there. He's had 36, 27, 33 fantasy points over the last 4 weeks. So I would consider 14 fantasy points almost like a dud performance for him from last week. A remember me game is a great way to describe a player in Adams who has approaching half the ownership of Josh Jacobs. He's a great play. And in terms of adjusted fantasy points allowed, the Chargers are about league average, slightly above, but as you said, kind of dipping in terms of that efficiency against the pass over the last few weeks.
Mac Hollins, 96% of the offensive snaps. No Hunter Renfrow. He's playing baseball. That was a joke because Hunter Renfrow is a baseball player. Whatever. How are you feeling about Mr. Mac Hollins at all?
In the you can play him range, I think he had more luck randomness than I'm suddenly changing my opinion on him type of game last week. Obviously, is a pretty solid score, but he's still 30th in expected fantasy points on this slate. I don't expect that to rise. He's got to be super efficient again.
Yep, I'm with you. Foster the people, Gerald Everett, the coolest visor in all of the land. Just serviceable guys that I think you can incorporate into your stacks, but in no way any kind of a priority, right?
100%. As you loved Foster Moreau's one of your dudes. We can play him again. High total game, 50 plus. Absolutely fine with him at a low salary.
I mean, he's my dude because I played like 80% of him on a slate where he was like 2% last year. And I think he went for 18. Yeah. Philadelphia, week 7. That was fun. He's fun.
Tight end 9 in projection, tight end 9 in expected fantasy points, tight end 10 in salary rank. Clearly you can play him.
All right. Let's jump to Cleveland. Oh, anything else from this one?
No, that's it.
Cool. Cleveland, Houston. We'll start making up some time as we get into some of these games, which are a little bit more clear cut. There's one game that I do want to spend some time on. Hi, Philadelphia, looking at you. But let's jump to Cleveland and Houston. Yeah, it's the return of the guy. You know who I'm talking about. Deshaun Watson here. 7-point total here. Cleveland 7-point favorites going up against Houston. They get, by all intents and purposes, an elite quarterback back into the fray here. I am very intrigued to see where his ownership comes in at. Should he be playing football or not? That's a different question, but he is going to end up being, I think, a lot more popular than what we currently have in our tools. I don't think he's going to be in any way limited. I don't think he's going to have in any kind of way, shape, or form an issue, but this is just one of those spots where on the road, yeah, they could run the rock with Nick Chubb a bunch. Houston's been horrendous at stopping the run, and Nick Chubb makes a lot of sense at 8K in tournaments, but if you get Deshaun Watson back to the prowess of 2020, it is really hard not to say that he might be the most under-owned quarterback at sub 7% on this entire slate.
Watson immediately changes this team in a way that is not yet realized by the public, but Vegas is very aware. Yeah. Their implied total of 27 is the second highest implied team total on the slate. The only reason we're talking about it this high on the board is because of what Vegas believes Deshaun Watson can bring to an offense with Nick Chubb, Amari Cooper, and some pieces that have shown up at times. Kareem Hunt is not the same player he was 4 years ago. Amari Cooper, honestly impressive with the quarterbacks he's had. And then Donovan Peoples-Jones becomes immediately relevant with a player like Deshaun Watson at the helm. Look, we can have the moral and ethics conversation with smarter people some other day. This dude changes the way we think about Cleveland, and the Houston defense is atrocious. It really isn't that hard to suss them out because we know Cooper is good, Chubb is a great play, and as you mentioned up top, Njoku's ready to fly. Expected fantasy points, top 5 already at the position. Our projections in the top 5, and tight end 1 overall weeks are, I believe, in his future with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, when he was out, I went and picked him up just about everywhere I could. The only place where I couldn't go get him was in the Osmo League. Damn you people. I'm 11-1. It's okay. But David Njoku, I tell you what, this guy, 3,900 for a dude who's going to be on the field nonstop now. we are seeing him just get unleashed, and it could be very, very fun for him. I think that he is going to be a massive beneficiary here as you go from Jacoby Brissett to David Njoku underneath this offense. I think Donovan Peoples-Jones becomes very intriguing in tournaments. Looks like the ownership is going to start to crawl up for him too at 4,900. He's at 4%, 3.7% on DraftKings right now. I want to get shares of that. It's so gross to say, but I think Deshaun Watson, if the slate started today, would be my highest owned quarterback.
If the ownership really looks like this, then we gotta consider this smash. We really do. Quarterback, I believe 7 is the lowest he's ever finished in terms of points per game at the position. We've seen incredible ceiling performances from not just his number one wide receiver when he has a capable one in DeAndre Hopkins all those years in Houston, but speedsters like your Will Fullers of the world, like your Donovan Peoples-Jones, even David Bell becomes theoretically large field viable now when you talk about Deshaun Watson behind center. Again, Houston's defense is not as bad as we thought against the pass. They are 11th in adjusted fantasy points allowed, but they're nowhere near good. They're terrible against the run. So Chubb is still a viable option as well.
Yeah, positive leverage there. We're seeing in the boom bust tool. Great job, Tyler Zander, pulling things up on the fly. Love it. And all the other quarterbacks that exist with positive leverage are guys like Bryce Perkins, Kenny Pickett. In Atlanta, I don't completely hate it. Tua Tagovailoa makes all the sense up there as well, but a lot of lower total games. Kyle Allen, good Lord almighty. On the other side of this one, I can't necessarily vouch for anything Kyle Allen wise going up against Cleveland, but there is Dameon Pierce. He is like your one quote unquote source of savings at the running back position, sub 6K. Cleveland's had some issues. I just talked about Austin Eckler. What's the one game he went for over 85 yards? Oh, well, it would just be like everybody has, just badgering this Cleveland defense that can't stop you or me running the football. Austin Eckler in that game went for 173 rushing yards. We've seen stuff like that from Ramondre Stevenson. We've seen just this Cleveland defense incapable at stopping the run. How are you feeling about Dameon Pierce at this kind of ownership, though?
Well, I was hoping that the fact that he's had, 32 total yards over the last 2 weeks would deter people. But people are getting smarter. They know that the adjusted fantasy points allowed or whatever metric they're looking at for Cleveland, they're bad against running backs. They know that Dameon Pierce has serious upside here, even after 2 dud weeks. He's still top 13 in expected fantasy points per game over the last 6 weeks, even with those 2 bad performances, making him very viable just from an opportunity standpoint, and the matchup is good enough. I don't really love anything else from the Houston side because I don't really think they're going to play a true catch-up game passing all of a sudden. Kyle Allen is not someone I need to mess with, even at 2.2% ownership. So it's really Pierce or bust on this Houston team. Maybe some large field sprinkle shots elsewhere, but not really.
You ready for the hot take? Are you ready for the hot take of the show?
Oh, let's go.
I think Brandon Cooks has a massive week this week. I think if I'm going to be playing any run back, I know Nico Collins, people are talking about him being an absolute lock there. I get it. We've started to see that target volume go up a lot higher, but I think my main run back in this game is going to end up being a 5K Brandon Cooks. So let me just talk through it a little bit. Denzel Ward might be the worst cornerback in all of football right now. This guy can't stop anybody on the outside. You get a speedster like Cooks here. Delpit is not a very good safety sitting in the back there. I am pretty confident that if they can give Kyle Allen some sort of time here, which is a big ask when you have Myles Garrett back in the fray, but I do think Denzel Ward ends up on Brandon Cooks, and I try not to go crazy with cornerback wide receiver matchups, but this one is just a little bit too tasty to overlook. Everybody is playing Nico Collins this week. Absolutely everybody seems to be making this the main run back. He's at what? Well, he's only at 7% here. I've seen some other spots a little bit higher. Brandon Cooks at 2.5%. Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy. I am very nervous about how much I'm going to have of him.
This makes sense. I completely get this. But if I'm actually looking at the defense for Cleveland, they've turned into a huge run funnel. a huge run funnel against the wide receiver position specifically. They're sixth best in the NFL. If you include the tight end position and just say the passing defense, they're third best in adjusted fantasy points allowed to opposing receiving cores. Not saying they're suddenly great, and I actually buy what you're saying from an individual standpoint. But I am noticing the overall trend that they are atrocious against the run and pretty good against the pass. And it's worth mentioning. I really like that call, especially when you're talking about what, 2-3% ownership expected for Cooks. This makes sense.
He's going to have his first good game in a while. What is he at? It's week 4. He had 18.7. Yeah, he's started to see fewer targets than Nico Collins. I think Nico Collins ends up being pretty popular. I'm very nervous about that. When you switch the quarterback out, though, we have a 1 week sample size, 5 targets there for Brandon Cooks, Nico Collins, 9. Give me Brandon Cooks here at the far reduced ownership. But as I said before, at the tight end position, David Njoku going with our boy. Well, not our boy, not at all. He would be my boy for purely DFS sake, Deshaun Watson. And then Jordan Akins, whatever. He's just a dude that exists in the world. Had a decent enough game, though, last week. I don't know how you could have possibly gotten onto him. He's pulling 2.5% now. Seems about appropriate for a guy who just went off the last week. So sweet. Nothing else to really speak of. Maybe a little bit of Cleveland defense as a contrarian option just because they can get after the pass in such a prominent way with Myles Garrett. But anything else in this game for you?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll probably be with the field with Nico Collins. I understand it as a run back option. Jordan Akins did have the highest target quantity he's had all season. Worth noting. Glad you did, but still not going to go completely overboard on a player who's 2.9K. He's down there for a reason because it's low probability.
Let's talk our sponsor Prize Picks here. Again, it's weird to be 4 games through, but this is kind of the halfway point of the show just because we'll get flying here 37 minutes. We'll go like 10 over. We'll go till like the 9:40 my time. Yeah, I didn't get up at 5:30 a.m. not to just take my 100 minutes of time. That's what we're doing.
Oh, I'm here all day. You love
Okay.
I love it.
Tyler, you want to stay here for another 3 hours? Love you too. Let's go to prizepicks.com, everybody. I absolutely love playing over there. I played throughout all of MLB. I've been playing and doing content for NFL. NBA is really, really fun as well. There's only the one game over there, but guess what? You can play across multiple sports. Super easy to put parlays together of different betting cards. You have an opportunity to play 2, 3, 4, or 5 player props together, all together in one lineup. You click more or less on those, and you can win some massive, massive money. How much? Well, up to 10x your entry fee. But also with some of these flex plays for 5x, or when you play 5 different players, you can still 2x your money by getting 4 out of 5, where at a traditional book, you're going to be losing that cash right out the gate. You get 3 out of 5, you can recoup some of your money, whereas you would definitely be shit out of luck playing it at a book. So lots of reasons that Prize Picks is taking off. Yeah, you're seeing a commercial everywhere. You're seeing it all around the place. But here's why. It's awesome. College basketball, NHL, soccer. They have highlights sometimes. I'm telling you, they have absolutely everything. PGA in full effect here this week. John Rahm's going to go berserk. Just get ready for that. But just telling you right now, Prize Picks is awesome. You need to be playing over there and start playing by using promo code Stokastic to get up to $100 for a first match deposit bonus right now. And hey, Christian Wood, while we were on this show, just got downgraded to questionable. He's not going to play. Let me just throw that out there right now. Definitely not going to play. I think that changes a little bit of what we're looking at for somebody like Dorian Finney-Smith in terms of a rebound rate. You get that second unit. There's really nobody to capitalize on there. Tim Hardaway Jr. now in that starting unit as well. That's kind of been a little bit of a shift for them. So just saying, there are some opportunities in the NBA streets as well as in the NFL streets for tonight. Josh Allen might want to be paying attention to some of those there. Receiving touchdowns, Stephon Diggs is going to get in the box against New England. Yeah.
Did we just get a triple sport insight that could be cashed in all on Prize Picks?
John Rahm over 5 birdies or more because he's going to go down to where are they playing at? They're playing in Albany. If you've seen this golf tournament, it is just a birdie fest amongst 30 of the best players in the world. It's all Tiger Woods buddies hanging out there. So that'll be enjoyable. So enjoy that. But you did get the tri-sport. You got the trifecta just from me.
I dig it. I might just tail you on that one. That sounds fun.
No
I
pressure.
Prize
Ronaldo.
picks in general.
I put Ronaldo to score a goal in too, so that's a quad feed.
Ooh.
Okay. Ooh, I like it. How about Full Crew? He's going to score against Costa Rica. Nicholas,
I like it.
I think he's going to score too. Germany. I know Costa Rica. Somebody said value in my premium Discord. I do not believe that is true. But anyways, here's what it is. Use promo code Stokastic. Get $100 first match deposit bonus and play at the best place you can possibly put your money for any sort of player props. Yes, that is at prizepicks.com. Download the app at the App Store at Google Play or go to app.prizepicks.com and start winning some money right now. Thank you so much to them for their sponsorship of this show. So many other shows here at Stokastic, but God, I love playing their site. Alrighty, y'all. Let's continue on our merry way. Miami, 4-point dogs going into San Francisco, 46.5 total here. And the story of this one, what the hell is going on at the running back position for the San Francisco 49ers? I don't know. Eli Mitchell's out. Christian McCaffrey's dinked up. If he doesn't play, God help us all.
They're probably going to have someone emerge, right? Like Tyrion Davis-Price is going to have the game of his life, or Jordan Mason is going to turn into
Coleman.
Yeah. Like, look, in the largest field tournaments, when you're trying to take down a milli maker, you can take a chance on San Francisco running backs blindly at home when favored. I still think the most likely outcome is Christian McCaffrey is helpful for your DFS lineups, or no one is helpful for your fantasy lineups at the running back position for the San Francisco 49ers. They're a good running team. They just don't have one player who sticks out if McCaffrey can't go. You probably see Deebo Samuel get more opportunity from a pure rushing standpoint, which makes the median projection increase a little bit here. And it would help him. The expected fantasy points are down for Deebo Samuel since Christian McCaffrey came into the fold. But I think what the heck do you do with this running back core might be I avoid it entirely if Christian McCaffrey is in play.
I think it becomes Deebo Samuel a running back week. I get the coach speak that has existed forever from Shanahan, and we've never really known what to do with running backs. And then all of a sudden, Eli Mitchell's playing a lot more than anybody expected, considering they went out and acquired Christian McCaffrey. I think he just feels like they've got a really, really good football team, but they do need to start putting the foot down a little bit and continue winning some football games because there's some chasers in the NFC. You don't want to be in that wild card round if you can avoid it. That would be ideal. Deebo Samuel, I think, is their best path. They have gotten such functional wide receiver play out of Brandon Ayuk this season that I don't even understand. Juwan Jennings was targeted like crazy last week. If you watch that game, 7 targets for him, 6 catches. He was the go-to guy in a lot of situations. Brandon Ayuk was incredible on third downs. Watched almost that entire game. Got to tell you, I'm very, very impressed by Shanahan as a coach. I always have been. I think if you started a football team with one coach, I probably pick him. But do I feel good enough to play any kind of Jimmy Garoppolo as a stack with these guys? Might be a different conversation. What do you feel about him at the wide receiver, or sorry, with him at the quarterback position, stacking him up with these wide receivers? Where, hey, they still might pound the rock 30 times in this game.
Yeah. Kyle Shanahan's getting to a point where the rules of rational coaching don't apply because I am fully against coach worship, which really happens a lot, particularly in the mainstream NFL sphere. But I feel like I could take all the information I have about a San Francisco 49ers game and the game plan going forward might still be different than I think because Kyle Shanahan might see an exploit that I don't or I can't. I still think Jimmy G is viable when you're talking about a player on a team with nearly 25 implied points. He's 3.5% expected ownership. His projections just outside the top 12. And as you said, we kind of have some target and opportunity consolidation with Ayuk, Kittle, of course, and Jennings. It's not my favorite play in the whole world, but you need about 25 to 28 points, and you're feeling really, really good about Garoppolo at 5,700, just 11% of your salary cap on DraftKings.
Well, let's get weird because I've never seen this before. But we have such an explosive offense in Miami here, and Tua Tagovailoa is pulling 0.6% ownership. That can't be right.
That has to change or be a data error, because this is one of the most surprising implied totals of the entire week. Look,
Agreed.
there are some concerns about the offensive line being banged up, and it looks like the OL it could have a tipping point for Miami, but you still just need 30 to 35 points from Tua, which he's capable of in a tournament environment at 6,700 when he has Hill and Waddle, and honestly Mike McDaniel up there as one of the more innovative coaches as well in the league. This defense is good in San Francisco, but it doesn't make Tua unplayable.
Yeah, Travarius Ward is going to be out there on the corner against Tyreek Hill, the number one wide receiver in pretty much any statistical category and in PFF's grading, and he's just a freak. I love Jalen Waddle. He's like my second-born child for what he's doing for me. He has literally put my best ball teams on his back and just saved the day, even though part of why I did it is I just didn't think Tua was very good. I might be eating some crow on that one. I will say, if you give me sub 5% on him and being able to stack him up, I'm going to have to get to that team a lot, even though our top stacks tool is not about Miami in this spot.
Yep, it happens sometimes. We still have them as the 6th highest probability stack, but their rating is quite low outside the top 12 because the salary compared to projection is too high. They're below salary-based expectations in terms of projection as a stack. That doesn't make them unplayable, guys. It just means that you have to do something that looks like you're gaining more value with your low salary players. Hill is super expensive at 8,800. Even Waddle is really tough to get to, 7,400, the 6th highest salary wideout on this slate. And in adjusted fantasy points allowed, San Francisco's above average, but not as far above average as you would think. Against receiving cores, they're just 13th in the NFL, not 1 or 2. They are 5 against the run.
I think Deebo Samuel is probably my favorite tournament play from this entire game, just because I do think you could see him getting some of that running work. Tevin Coleman, practice squad. I know he's Shanahan's boy. Tyrion Davis-Price, good coach speak for the third. We've seen San Francisco just screw up constantly in terms of draft capital, but Jordan Mason, because of his special teams acumen, has been a guy that's been the backup to the backup to the backup. Last couple, I think he'll continue to be active. I don't think he'll get any work, so to speak here. I just feel like because of Deebo Samuel's ability to run the football like we've seen, going back to that Green Bay playoff game, which was just absolutely incredible in the snow, in the cold, and last season, I think they maybe just say, hey, is your hamstring okay? And they start feeding him the rock. Going to just be a wild game, because I could see this game doing absolutely nothing, or I could see it shooting out and being like, hey, why didn't we play Tua doubles with Deebo Samuel?
Deebo is the play here on the San Francisco side for me. We can try to talk our way into a hopefully healthy Christian McCaffrey. We can try to talk our way into Garoppolo. We can even try to talk our way into George Kittle or Juwan Jennings. But Deebo Samuel has the safest floor and arguably the highest ceiling here. He's just an incredible player with the ball in his hands. Once again, his YAC numbers are incredible. His yards created numbers are incredible. His expected fantasy points, his opportunity value is okay. With these injuries, I think you can see that number rise. It's for sure my favorite play on the San Francisco side.
Most broken tackles after first contact in the entire NFL this season. Deebo Samuel. That shouldn't surprise anybody.
Put the ball in his hands is something Kyle Shanahan realized last year, and it's been working pretty well.
Guys, I just talked about how Deebo Samuel isn't healthy, but he was limited practice yesterday. He still played the rest of the game, even though he came up limp there for a hot second. Freaked the crap out of me. I have a legendary Deebo Samuel that needs to get sold before Sunday. So please, either that or I'm going to have to play him, and then that is just what it is. God, it always comes back to Rainmakers, doesn't it? George Kittle, you can get there, but 5K, so many more options that we could be going to. Maybe they have to air it out a little bit more. We're sleeping a little bit on Jimmy G, but I don't think so.
Nope, I don't think so. Look, we saw just that game against Arizona 2 weeks ago. We finally had the games that we wanted from George Kittle, but ultimately that's still not the expectation. He's 6th in expected fantasy points among all tight ends on the slate, making him playable, but not my favorite.
Let's go to another really, really popular game compared to pretty much anything we've talked about up to this point, other than Jacksonville and Detroit. It is the Minnesota Vikings. My Minnesota Vikings hosting the Jets. Jets 3-point dogs here. How about Mike White, guys? We've seen it a couple of times, and they didn't have nearly the defense that they did in 2021. In a couple of those games we saw from Mike White, he had 2 massive upside games in come from behind mode. That specifically the Cincinnati one from week 8 in 2021 sticks out the most. But coming into this week, he's coming off of 22 for 28, 149.3% passer rating. Is he this good? 3 touchdown passes, 300 yards. I mean, that's useful on DraftKings.com.
I'm having a wild moment here as my wireless mouse just went down and I'm trying to like move. This has been the show, man. But Mike White is clearly easy to talk about because he's so much better than Zach Wilson. You need no football acumen. You need no numbers to understand that this person understands the quarterback position better than Zach Wilson did.
And he's not a little twat.
You said it, man. Like, look, that answer again after what in that press conference where did you let the defense down? The body language, the tone of voice, the lack of taking ownership. It's everything you don't want to see in a quarterback. I hate to say it, but there are certain things you need from team leaders because football guys are still always going to be football guys. And Zach Wilson is failing horribly in that category. And the only way you can get by that is stellar play, which anything but was happening on the field. Look, Garrett Wilson gets there with Mike White in the pouring rain against the Chicago Bears. I still think you can get to a play like Mike White. It is not point chasing against a Minnesota defense that is better than Chicago. But if you look at the metrics I look at, I'm still looking at a slightly below average defense. I don't know if you're going to get a QB 6 performance again, but I do actually like him at QB 16 in salary.
Oh boy. Kirk Cousins pretty popular too. It's just kind of is what it is. 5.6%. That's not nothing. He's still under 6K. Lots of under 6K quarterbacks that you're trying to make a thing on this week. Jalen Hurts and Deshaun Watson, if the slate started today, would be my absolute. I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what to say.
They're smashes. I think the ownership is going to come up for Watson, though. Like, definitely keep your eye on that. We'll be here for Live Before Lock talking about it on Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, wherever you are in the world. So keep an eye on how that changes. But right now, the value is good.
Takes can change based on new information. What doesn't change is your analysis of the games here, and that's where Justin Jefferson's kind of fun. Lots of targets, really good at football, obvious number one, obvious guy that you want to pair with Kirk Cousins. If you played Kirk Cousins without Justin Jefferson, you probably should never play fantasy football ever again.
It's pretty easy, right? You don't need Kirk Cousins to get the upside of the Minnesota Vikings. And I could argue this year, you don't necessarily need Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
With Thielen falling off, it's like Jefferson or the offense didn't do well. You can play Kirk with, if you want to attach yourself to a stack of Justin Jefferson, but I think it's still viable to do a small stack, Cook Jefferson if you have the room, a Thielen Jefferson if you have the room. And adjusted fantasy points allowed, the matchup is pretty tough suddenly because the Jets defense looks better, but it's really coming down to Sauce Gardner, individual players changing that metric. I still think Jefferson's a really, really strong play. At 8,900, tough to put in. Projection slightly below salary-based expectation, but just barely. We're not talking about an unplayable player, just a fine player, not a must-get to.
Yeah, Cook has been off all year. Part of that is schematically. I mean, you get Justin Jefferson into the fold, and that helps things out a lot. If you look at the 66% of the time pass plays for the Minnesota Vikings, that's up from league average. When you have Justin Jefferson, you just air it out a little bit more. So I don't think it's necessarily that. Also, offensive line is still all right. It's the jury's still out on Minnesota. So I understand the trepidation there.
For sure. And, look, I didn't expect the Jets defense to click this soon, but second in adjusted fantasy points allowed against opposing receiving cores going into week 13, going into December is not something I had on my 2022 NFL bingo card for the Jets.
No. No. How are we feeling about this running back core? Because this might be similar to San Francisco. Sorry, my allergies are just going nuts since we started this show. I don't know what happened, but
You got a hug from your dog and then
I
bam.
did. Oh my God. Michael Carter, questionable. I mean, this is going to come down to the wire. I don't really have any kind of a lean, but let me tell you how uncomfortable it feels knowing that Bam Knight, Ty Johnson, those might be things because James Robinson, dude was inactive. They traded for him. They don't really care. They took a shot on it. Maybe it didn't work out the way that they wanted it to. It is going to be Michael Carter. I mean, it's just such a gross spot. It's such a gross spot. We won't. If Michael Carter sits, do you have interest in anything from the Jets side?
I think they like Zonovan Bam Knight. I think they do. He had 10 expected fantasy points in his first usage really all season. If Michael Carter is really hurt, Ty Johnson is going to mix in, but Zonovan Knight's going to get his chance to play. I like the passing game. I like Mike White DGAF mode a little bit better. I think it would make sense, especially considering he's 4,600 and the Minnesota Vikings are slightly below league average against running backs this year in adjusted fantasy points allowed.
Well, let's talk the one guy from the Jet side who is infinity percent owned. He was last week. Of course, he got there when I wasn't very high on it. Probably the one huge hole. I would have had a huge week if I had played Garrett Wilson along with Josh Jacobs. Alas, I did not do those things. So that sucked. Garrett Wilson, 17%, second highest owned wide receiver on the board. He is so freakishly talented out of the Ohio State University. Do you expect him to run back what he did last week? 95 and 2 touchdowns. Why, God?
No, you can't say he's going to run back 2 touchdowns, but it's possible. And he's still
at mega chalk too. At mega chalk.
Right. But still, they're like basically egging you on to play him again. Do you know the Minnesota Vikings are 32nd, dead last in the NFL in adjusted fantasy points allowed to opposing receiving cores, wide receivers, and tight ends?
They're not very good.
Bad. I think that the public hasn't caught up to just how bad it is because the record, the win-loss record, has been so good. And Wilson is 5,300. He's outside the top 20 wide receivers in salary. We've got him inside the top 10 in projection, so the chalk makes sense. You're going to have to do something contrarian. Even just rostering him with Mike White is going to make you more contrarian, but Wilson's a clear value.
It's the reason that Minnesota's been functional on defense is because why am I doing this? I'm saying basketball names. I'm doing whatever. Zadarius Smith and Daniel Hunter. There we go. They're incredible on the right side of that defensive line. I feel pretty confident they can get after White here in some spots. I'll take some shots on Minnesota defense as well, but we just saw Mac Jones be able to get there and be functional. It's difficult to want to go overboard there. There are some holes on that Jets offensive line. I think we can still take some shots on it. Not much in terms of a running game that exists there. Their defense, the Jets have been so good defensively. I could not possibly love Quinnen Williams more. That guy is an absolute monster on the interior. But Minnesota, it's my team. I'm biased. I understand it. It's going to be pretty easy, though, for me to get away from just about everything in this game besides Justin Jefferson.
Agreed. If you want to take some shots on Thielen, go for it. Hawkinson's gotten really good usage, the third best tight end opportunity value on this slate since becoming a Viking. That's signal to me. But again, if you wanted to just play this Jefferson or bust because the defense in New York is actually kind of good, I think that is a rational way to look at this one.
All right, we go to the main event for me that isn't Deshaun Watson. It is Tennessee, Derrick Henry's going up against Philadelphia and the Jalen Hurtses. Oh boy, Jalen Hurts is at 5.3%. Oh boy, he's at 8K, which is actually cheaper than what we've seen from him in the last couple of weeks. I don't know why his tag went down. All I know is that if the slate started right now, he would be my second highest owned quarterback. The only difficulty is, do you play him naked? Because we're seeing him in the last 2 weeks get such crazy rushing volume, 16 and 17 rushing attempts. They are saying, hey, Jalen Hurts, go ahead and go win it for us. And he's going out and winning it for them. How do you feel about him as a quarterback option on Sunday? I'm assuming pretty good.
Pretty darn good. Again, the ownership is the thing that's really dictating this, though.
Mm-hmm.
So if I saw that he was mega chalk, I would probably change my tune here because the projection is just right at salary-based expectation. It's not way, way ahead, nor is the expected fantasy points. So really what this is the game plan for Philadelphia, for this going well for Philadelphia, includes Jalen Hurts being efficient in some manner, rushing or passing. And he's done that over the last 6 weeks. He's at 5 fantasy points over expected per game. I think naked is a really good way to get there because he is fairly expensive at 8K. If you want to stack him up, you're talking about 7,800 for AJ Brown. And while the 3 touchdown upside is there, their top stack probability is outside the top 5. It's actually just inside the top 8. And I still think Devonta Smith, that's low probability plays, especially down the board beyond that. Devonta Smith is still tough for me to get to. So it's one of these rushers. Hurts, of course. And then do you want to play Miles Sanders instead? 6,300 is a little expensive, but I do like this rushing attack, Hurts and Sanders, a little bit more than the passing game because of salary and ownership.
But A.J. Brown played for Tennessee before. A.J. Brown is going to go crazy.
It could happen. Look, he's in a decent spot. Tennessee's actually 29th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to opposing receiving core. But I think there's a reason they're not making it into the top 5 as a stack. I think there are just better spots here overall. If I'm playing 150, I will for sure get some Hurts, A.J. Brown stacks. That's not crazy at all. It's just not my favorite.
They're just pounding the rock. That's what it comes down to. It's a 44.5 total for a reason, fam. It's not some high octane. I mean, they're 10-1 for a reason, and part of that is just relying on that offensive line to get it done for them. My God, is there any better overachiever than Jason Kelce at the center position? The guy is incredible. You've got Lane Johnson out there on the right tackle doing absolute work, 5th in PFF's grading out of 76 right tackles in football. We all know Jordan Mailata is awesome too. A.J. Brown's a great wide receiver, no doubt about it, but he's 7,800. And do I want to put him in the same category as other guys? No. Will I get some shares if I play as much Jalen Hurts as I anticipate? Sure, but no way a priority for me.
I completely agree with everything you said. Don't get me started on Jason Kelce. Way too talented. Have you watched New Heights or listened to New Heights, the Kelce podcast?
I've seen clips of it online.
Dude,
haven't listened to it.
It's good. Travis and Jason Kelce have a great just free advertising because obviously it's really cool that currently excellent NFL players are joining the NFL media sphere. What a great insight into the game. They just had an interview with Mahomes I saw this morning. Look, that shit's awesome. Go watch it.
Thomas Ramon coming in hot. Hi, sir. How are you this fine day? I think he's listening to us way, way earlier because I said
that's fun.
How do you say Penny Sewell's name? Did I say that incorrectly? What's his name?
Penne is, I've heard. Penny Sewell is how I've heard it. But
Love you, Penny.
Yeah.
Instead of Jenne. I had to explain the joke. That probably doesn't make it funny.
Derrick
Henry.
Sorry.
Derrick Henry. If you want to get to him on a slate, how about at 8,100 against a Philadelphia team that was just ravaged by the Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon-led rushing attack? Maybe you could just see Derrick Henry go completely berserk and change the game script of it. I don't completely hate Derrick Henry with Jalen Hurts. I kind of do. I'll think about it a little bit more. But how do you feel about Derrick Henry in this spot?
So I do think Derrick Henry, Jalen Hurts is a solid single or 3 entry way to play this game environment. Like if you're betting on this game being a shootout, which it obviously has shootout potential being in sort of this mid-tier implied total, and then you wanted to see if you could capture a significant amount of the scoring upside with one lineup, I think Derrick Henry, Jalen Hurts is an interesting combination. It's probably not going to be the optimal way to play this if you're trying to take down the Millie or something like that. I still always put Henry in my he can score 30 and destroy the slate category. It looks okay this week. His projections ahead of salary-based expectations, and Philly's rush defense has gotten worse over the last few weeks. That's enough for me to put him in that category. It's not going to be a hyper priority play. I have 8K options that I want to prioritize more than him, but I certainly like Henry. Certainly like him more than Treylon Burks, but I will take some shots in large field saying, hey, maybe this is a passing game more than people think. Burks and then Brown on the other side.
I'm with you. I think that I like the Treylon Burks play. I think that that's decent enough. Titans pulling a little bit defensive ownership. They're 2,200 on DraftKings. That is fascinating. They're the cheapest defense on the board. If you're just trying to punt it entirely, maybe you don't get completely burned by it. So I understand why the ownership's there. I'm not feeling it though. I'm feeling the Jalen Hurts play. Like I'm feeling literally nothing at the tight end position here.
What? Jack Stoll? No. Also, Tennessee is
Stoll
classic.
sample. That's the best thing that's happened with Jack Stoll. That joke. It's a Stoll sample. You need a Stoll sample? We have it now. He's not very good.
We have a Stoll sample.
I'll be here all week.
You broke me. Damn it.
It's okay. We got Green Bay and Chicago coming up next year. I said we're in a rhythm now, baby. We're gonna get through here. Just 15 past the hour, or 15 before the hour. Good thing I can tell time. It is Green Bay minus 4.5 point favorites going into Chicago, 43.5 total. That might change a little bit. We'll see what happens. Justin Fields limited in practice on Wednesday. Can't believe that after what we've seen from the week 9, week 10, week 11 performances, really since week 7, they found something in this rushing attack with him. Week 6 even started to see more volume going that direction, even in that Washington loss. He's starting to put it together as a quarterback, but now you're going to go put him out there into harm's way for nothing. Kind of seems like a weird spot to maybe introduce him, but hey, Bear's going to bear. It's fine. If Justin Fields plays at 7,400, gotta assume he's going to be more popular than 2.1% that we currently have him at. And hey, while we said this, Aaron Rodgers going to be limited in practice Thursday. He's playing football for the Green Bay side. But first, Justin Fields, how would he fit into the landscape of this slate if he plays?
I would probably be, look, I think his ownership would go up towards the double-digit range, like close 8 to 10%. And I would probably use ownership as my guide because I still think that people are overestimating the ceiling potential because he's had some of the best rushing quarterback performances we've seen since Lamar Jackson's MVP season, certainly. And, the highest rushing yards of all time from a quarterback happened in Justin Fields' game log this year. It's probably not happening again. He's figured some things out, and this team in general have figured things out, but I actually think they should shut him down. I think they should have put him on IR already.
They're 3-9. What are they going to do? Run
the
table
figure it
and
out
get
next year. I don't know.
Weird.
Maybe they just want him to practice, and they don't really have any real intention of making him play. They just have certain things that wouldn't be available to him in the facility that if he were on injured reserve, but I think it's a low probability that he does play, which is annoying because it probably means I'm out on all Bears passing options, period. I'll probably only play Montgomery if I'm playing any Bears because he's got a projection way ahead of salary-based expectation. And then we got to get to this mess that is the Packers because I don't know if Rodgers is good even if he suits up.
Yeah, I mean, you got Bakhtiari. He's questionable coming into this one as well. A.J. Dillon is questionable. I think he'll end up being fine. But a lot of things with Aaron Rodgers that make it difficult to really palate it. I think this is a play both defenses kind of a spot, especially if Nathan Peterman ends up being your quarterback. Trevor Siemian did not practice on Wednesday. Peterman got demoted back to the practice squad, but pay attention to the practice reports here because, it doesn't mean jack diddly squat. He'll be back up there in no time here if they decide to do the smart thing and shut down Fields. But something tells me that that's not the case. I guess when it's playing for your job constantly throughout any kind of a sample size, you want your best players out there. Justin Fields does give them the best chance to win football games, but why that would be the goal right now, I don't know. Let's talk the Green Bay running game, though, because Aaron Jones, a little dinged up, but he's fine. He was limited in practice on Wednesday. A.J. Dillon, that's the guy to pay attention to because he practiced in a limited capacity, but it was a quadriceps injury for him. If he ends up not playing, we know to jam Aaron Jones. If Aaron Jones doesn't play, to jam A.J. Dillon. That's not going to change a whole lot. But how do you feel about Aaron Jones pulling a little bit of ownership here at the running back position?
I'm fine with it. We know that there's multi-touchdown upside here. The salary is okay, especially on DraftKings, 6,900, pretty nice. That's 10th best among all running backs, and his projection is 10th best among all running backs. Slightly lower, slightly below his leverage score, but I ultimately think that you're going to see a lot of dump down passes from Aaron Rodgers, getting the ball out of his hands quickly. And I think that really benefits Aaron Jones, and especially with A.J. Dillon kind of banged up and the Chicago defense not good against anyone, 25th against running backs, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Khalil Herbert on injured reserve. That means David Montgomery is going to always ascend to the top of the board in these kind of spots. And sure enough, projecting out very, very nicely. Third highest projected running back. He's 6,200 here in this spot. We just saw Green Bay get gashed by Philadelphia, but also that was Philadelphia. And if you have Nathan Peterman out there, maybe David Montgomery gets there on pure volume alone. But boy, is this an uncomfortable play as the third highest owned running back on the board.
With Montgomery, this is hard because I'm not even sure he's good, but we need the value and he's going to get the work if he's healthy. It's really that simple. They have nobody in that backfield who can really compete. Like, are you going to have like Tristan Ebner or something like that? This is a mess. This is a mess of a team that should be they should be going full preseason mode and testing everyone on the roster, giving them snaps, but I'm just not sure they're going to do it. If that's the case, then David Montgomery is in for a heavy workload against a Packers team who's 26th against opposing running backs.
Yeah, could be wild. Could be very wild. Very large range of outcomes here. I will say that much. I wish shout out Iowa State, but you guys have been disappointing. Alan Lazard and him. Breece Hall, you were carrying the Iowa State torch for us this year.
You were the chosen one. He'll be back though. He's awesome.
Thank you. That was Star Wars Episode 3. I love you. Let's talk wide receivers from Chicago. I don't really want to, but I guess we kind of have to. Darnell Mooney out for the season. Had surgery. Bye-bye. Chase Claypool dinged up, but now sub 4K. Is it Byron Pringle week?
This is a Dr. Evil receiving core. This is how about now?
Thought I'd throw it out there. Cole Kmet might be the guy that you want to get some investment to, especially if Justin Fields plays.
Very fair. If Fields plays, and I have some mild interest in these receivers, and Kmet is fine, but it's because he's under 4K, and we have no good expectations for any non-Fields quarterback, regardless who plays here. I think if you're talking about large field tournaments, this is a cross off your list kind of receiving core. I really do.
All right. Green Bay, finish it out. Is Christian Watson going to go for 1 million touchdowns again this week?
No. No.
I did like him as a prospect out of North Dakota State. You never really know what to make of him, but he just has like the prototypical body. He is a speedster. He's physically gifted. The problem was that he couldn't, like, you needed to attach the ball to his body because he couldn't catch it. And that's difficult when you're a wide receiver who's supposed to catch footballs. Last 3 weeks, he's kind of figured it out.
Yeah, that's very fair. 8 targets, 6 targets, 6 targets. Clearly, a trust factor has increased by an order of magnitude compared to the beginning of the season with Aaron Rodgers. We don't know how healthy he is, but Watson is clearly the wide receiver one. 82% route rate last week. And 20 fantasy points, 3 straight weeks now? Okay. I will take it back a little bit. I will have more than 5% Christian Watson if that's really what his ownership is. If that's really the upside here.
Let's play a game called 4 Games, 10 Minutes. Shall we do it?
Let's do it.
Kenny Pickett, Marcus Mariota facing off here. Pittsburgh in Atlanta, going to a dome again, back-to-back weeks. We just saw in primetime, Kenny Pickett put it together a little bit, even though it didn't show up in the fantasy box score. 20 for 28, no touchdowns, 174. Najee Harris did some decent work. Then he got dinged up. Then you saw Anthony McFarland and then Benny Snell. It was get in the box. But Jaylen Warren back into the mix here. Jaylen Warren will be one of the most popular running backs on the slate if Najee Harris is out. We are still waiting on something there. Najee Harris did not practice on Wednesday. So if you're listening to this on Saturday, everything we're talking about could be completely different. If you do not see Najee Harris practice on Friday, be on the lookout. How you feeling about this game in general?
The fact that Atlanta's rush defense is so bad is the only reason this is worth talking about. Mm-hmm. It's gotten a little bit better but they're 23rd in adjusted fantasy points allowed. And if you look at Football Outsiders DVOA, it's even worse. This might be the first real look the Steelers get of Jaylen Warren. Now he's back. Najee Harris truly could be out for this team. I think Warren actually has a chance to be viable at 4,900 as a starter when he's the starter, considering the fact that Najee could be out. Pickett and this passing offense have underperformed all season long. He's actually 8th in expected fantasy points, but as one would expect, looking at Kenny Pickett's game logs, he's minus 5.5 fantasy points below expectation. That is clearly trickling down to players like Deontay Johnson, who have one of the worst per target seasons we've ever seen at the wide receiver position right now, just completely underperforming expectations. And Pickens, while he is going to be a star, I think people are overrating his opportunity value because he's making so many highlight reel catches. Truly the only player in the passing game I'm interested in is Pat Freiermuth, who continues to be a safety valve option. He's had 12 target games, 7 targets in every single game except the Monday night game since he came back from that head injury. We've got him tight end 3 in projections.
Atlanta just runs the football so damn much. It is so annoying. I can't with this football team. One of the only teams in the NFL that have a higher rush rate, a number of rushing plays than passing plays. I hate it. I don't like it. They're not necessarily even good at running the football. They just do it a ton. Why, oh, why do they have to do this to us in a dome?
It increases the shootout potential of the other teams a little bit just because of how bad their defense is. And then they try to pull it back by running the ball as much as they do, lowering the amount of plays in a game. Stop it. Stop it. I know that Kyle Pitts is out for the year, but pass the ball, Marcus Mariota. Look, none of these players have projections ahead of salary-based expectations in the core running game options for Atlanta. But if you want to get hurt again, you can go back to Drake London at 4,700.
Mr. TD, Najee's been bad. I could not disagree more over the course of what we've seen the last couple weeks up until the injury. The dude was averaging 5 and 4.5 yards per carry, put up 27.6 fantasy points against Cincinnati. I mean, if you get opportunity, that's always great. Jaylen Warren had started to cut into that timeshare. Let me just say, though, we don't probably have to think about Najee Harris more than likely. I do think Jaylen Warren ends up being the highest owned running back on the slate because I don't expect Najee Harris to play.
Exactly how I'm seeing it as well. You know what? We'll be back on Sunday and we'll be able to break it down. We'll have all the ownership live updating and everything. So tune in to Stokastic. We got you covered.
That'll be fun. Drake London. We can't. Kyle Pitts doesn't exist. That's probably a good thing. Not for him. He's on the IR, and I hope he's well after surgery. But we don't have to think about the tight end options there. Just really nothing appealing from Atlanta, right?
Other than London, even Cordarrelle Patterson has a projection just at salary-based expectation at 5,800. If you want to try and capture one of those return touchdowns or long runs that he is capable of, go for it. Other than that, I'll just be playing London as a decent but mediocre value play.
All right, let's get to an uncomfortable one here in Seattle and the Rams. 40.5 total, 23, almost all of that going, almost a 24-point implied total for Seattle going up against the Rams. They're horrible. We just saw Bryce Perkins. He sure ain't it. Matthew Stafford, probably going to be out for this one, still in concussion protocol as it stands right now. Geno Smith, decent enough considering you know who to be pairing him up with. You got Mr. Tyler Lockett, you got DK Metcalf, and you have a Rams defense that has been very disappointed to say the very least. Aaron Donald going to be missing this one. That's exciting. That's really the only competent football player on this football team at this given point in time. Shout out Jalen Ramsey. He's all right too. But how are you feeling about Geno Smith in this spot?
I think they even ruled Aaron Donald out.
I didn't see it was officially out, but yeah, I didn't think he was going to play.
So you got no Stafford, no Kupp, no Aaron Donald. That passing defense has already been underperforming. Higbee's banged up. This is a team that you might just say no to.
Yep.
Look, I think this is a game environment that if you ask me what would it look like in August, I wouldn't have been more wrong than a Seattle, LA game environment. But I think everyone is viable for Seattle. Geno, Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. After that, you're talking only large field tournaments, but even Travis Homer is getting some expected fantasy points, some solid opportunity value in super large field tournaments. You can go there. I think Metcalf is fine at wide receiver 9. I think Lockett might even be a better value at 6K. And Geno Smith is still outperforming expectations, 2.5 fantasy points over expected per game. Can't say enough good things about him. I think Seattle has some really decent value options here.
Kenneth Walker, man, he's 7K. This is a price that went up despite some kind of outside of the Arizona game since week 8. We've seen 2.8, 1.7, and 1.9 yards per carry. They went to Travis Homer to close out that Vegas game. He was there in the backfield. He ends up catching the touchdown in the fourth quarter. I don't know how to feel about Kenneth Walker in this spot. Part of me wants to like him. Part of me wants to think that his ownership might come in lower, but he's already in double digits. He's up to a high point at 7K. How are you feeling about the rookie out of Michigan State?
He's okay. He's still really efficient as a rusher, and they want to give him the ball a lot. But you said it. Travis Homer getting more usage. Maybe Walker's not 100%. And double-digit expected ownership, really creeping up to that, not to Josh Jacobs level, but still within the top 8 running backs in expected ownership. And he's been hyper efficient to the point where it might actually come down. I think I like the passing game a little bit better.
Gun to your head, you have to play one piece of the Rams. Who do you pick?
Van Jefferson.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that that's the answer. Anything else from this game other than play Seattle defense?
Higbee if you hate yourself.
Higbee if you hate yourself. He didn't get targeted last week.
He didn't get targeted.
It was wild.
It's probably not going to happen again.
Yeah, it's wild. I will say it was nice that I didn't end up having to play Bryson Hopkins after I talked about it on Live Before Lock because Higbee ended up in, but woof to this football team. Seattle defense, the best if the slate started today. Why they aren't 4K, I don't know. Bryson Hopkins, not exactly good as a runner either. Let's go to the last 2 games on the board. This one should be quick. Washington and the New York Giants, 40.5 total, 2.5 point favorites. Washington on the road, 2.5 point favorites against the Giants. My, oh my, how record doesn't matter in the modern day NFL. Books just know that, public is going to end up on the Giants. I feel that coming, but 7-5, 7-4. Commanders just absolutely rolling with the help of Taylor Heineke. Well, not really the help of Taylor Heineke. He's not really having to do much. It's the running game. It is the combination of the defense. A lot of good things happening on the Washington end. Anything that stands out to you from that team whatsoever?
So Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson have been a pretty decent tandem. But if you look at the expected fantasy points and you combine them over the last 6 weeks for Gibson and Robinson, it would be 22 expected fantasy points per game. That is equal to the weekly expected fantasy points of Austin Eckler. So just to give you an idea of what a prolific offense, particularly one that passes to the running back, can do in opportunity value compared to a Washington team who is rather inefficient. They do play a lot of snaps. It's just a lot of things have to go right for either player is really what I'm getting at. They're not too expensive. You're talking about 5,100 for Heineke, 52 for Gibson, 53 for Robinson. In terms of straight up value, I think the best of that group is Gibson, who's barely inside the top 30 in terms of salary. And after that, I think Terry McLaurin is really the place I want to go. In adjusted fantasy points allowed, the Giants are 21st in adjusted fantasy points to receiving cores, well below average, clearly getting usage with Heineke. For me, it's one of those running backs, McLaurin, and probably just Logan Thomas in large field. Curtis Samuel is a player I'm kind of souring on, but if you wanted to go there against the Giants defense, it makes sense.
Daniel Bellinger, he's going to be returning for the Giants here. That's kind of the main thing to be paying attention to from their end. Richie James didn't practice Wednesday, so we're going to have to be paying attention to that. I doubt there's anything that shows up from the passing game. It's basically going to be, do I play Daniel Jones naked? Do I play Saquon Barkley in a forgot about Dre kind of a spot here? He's at 5.5% right now. Much lower owned than you're looking at for a Josh Jacobs, even though he's got all the work. He's a home dog running back. Kind of wild to talk about. What stands out to you from the Giants side?
I still will go back to Saquon Barkley and just really fast, Eric. Gibson has not practiced this week so far. So if If he's
Then
out,
you play Brian Robinson. That's pretty
Robinson,
clear-cut.
B-Rob Chop.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Barkley is fascinating to me because he's probably going to be under-owned. I can't believe how inefficient he's been. Like, is he a little banged up? But he's still second in expected fantasy points on this entire slate. He's still viable at 8,200. I don't think people want to go there because you still got to pay the Saquon Barkley salary. But look, Washington's defense has figured things out as a defensive line. Put him on your, he can score 30 list and then just move on. If you want to play him, you can.
Either defense intriguing here.
I think that you could play the Commanders defense and say that there is some risk of ruin. The Giants defense at 2 point, actually, that might be my favorite one. Taylor Heineke could have some mistakes. 2,900, the salary is right. And then the ownership's still just 6%. That's actually the better value.
Yep, I think so too. Guys, hit the like button, subscribe button, notification bell, but really hit that like button. Get us up over 100 here before we get out of here. Would very much appreciate that. If you guys are listening to us after the fact on YouTube, do the same thing. Like button. It counts all the same for us. If you're listening to us on Spotify and your favorite podcast, wherever, don't worry about it. You're doing great, sweetie. You're doing great. Last game on the board. You know who's not doing great? Russell Wilson. He's not cooking. He's being cooked. He is the chicken in the tub. How are we feeling about this Denver squad that can't do diddly squat?
Bad. Really, really bad. Ultimately, the best play of the day was that Latavius Murray breakaway run, and then you could kind of throw away the entire rest of the film. I said this in chat earlier. Russell Wilson was QB 33 last week. There were 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL, as there are every single week without buys. That means both Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love outscored Russell Wilson in fantasy scoring last week. Kind of amazing. Kind of a riddle. I think QB 23, where we currently have him in our projections, is generous for a Baltimore defense that's now 10th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. I don't really want any part of this Denver team except for maybe one-off shots of one of Cortland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy and just plugging my nose and playing him. Latavius has looked okay on his touches. I still don't think I need... Is he really capable of a tournament-winning score on a 12-game main slate right now with this Denver offense? I'd say no. Dulcich is fine at 3.4K too. That's it. I'm done with Denver.
Just done with them. Never again.
Mike Boone is back too. Like, this could even get spread out more.
Hey,
at the running back
Latavius
position.
Murray, 7.1 yards per rush last week. Why did they just keep giving him the football?
I don't know.
He only got 13 carries. Maybe because he would have died if he got more.
Or maybe they were selling out to stop it because why respect Russell Wilson's pass game right now?
But they didn't stop it.
Just insane what's happening in Denver right now. And they're stuck with Wilson next year because of the salary situation. You got to figure things out this offseason.
All right, Baltimore, the more appealing fantasy side of this one. But my God, if J.K. Dobbins ends up playing, he has a 21-day window to be activated. Here is flat 4K. I still don't think I have the balls to pull the trigger there. Gus Edwards, season high of snaps, over 55% of the snaps there for Baltimore last week. Kenyon Drake still exists. Justice Hill can get mixed in on passing downs. Demarcus Robinson, Devin Duvernay, Deshaun Jackson. It's just kind of getting spread out there. It's really Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews are bust here, isn't it?
It is. And all I will say is that Lamar Jackson is playing way better than his game logs indicate. He's even had games where I thought he could easily have 300 passing yards if his receivers didn't let him down, which is not the way we usually think of Lamar getting there. Obviously, the rushing has been there. 89 rushing yards last week. He's had 82 3 weeks ago. In true passer rating, one of my favorite advanced metrics for quarterback accuracy, he's 4th in the NFL. He's 10th in QBR. Lamar Jackson is a good, if not great, passer in the NFL. His receiving core is banged up, and even Mark Andrews is letting him down. I am down for some Lamar Andrews stacks, and even Lamar naked is still very viable. I know it's been meh from a fantasy scoring standpoint, but that blow-up game is coming.
Defenses?
You can play the Baltimore defense here for sure, especially because no one wants to get up to that top salary defense. 4K is not that expensive for a player.
All righty, guys. Yeah, Stephen Leibowitz said it best. He didn't know Lofty, that somebody could go longer on these shows than Lofty does. But hey, here you go. Tyler Zander, thank you for producing. Chiggy, it's like you were just, it's like you just got out of Nam. I'm sorry about that, my friend. It was a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. You've enjoyed.
Everybody has their own Vietnam. This was mine.
Love you too. Matt Savoca, any final words for the people as you get out of here? Any other last brilliance before I see you on Sunday for NFL Live Before Lock?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Just really appreciate you guys hanging out all the time. This chat is always some of the most fun I have hanging out in all week long. Really excited to do this Sunday show as usual with you, and a truly valiant effort filling in for Lofty. Appreciate you, bud.
Valiant, long-winded, if you will. Guys, it was a lot of fun. Hit that like button, goes a long way for us here. Don't forget to check out all the other great content we have coming up later in the day. Specifically, I know NFL Live Before Lock for the showdown game. Buffalo, they're going to be facing New England. That should be a very important one for all teams considered. And then also NBA Live Before Lock. We're just having the one show. It's just one game. So that'll be showing up. I believe that is Greg and Adam doing that one. NFL Live Before Lock. You're going to be back hosting with Neil Orfield. Looking forward to that. Check it out. Thank you again to Tyler. He is Matt Savoca. Go follow him at Draftaholic. I'm Eric Lindquist. Go follow me at Eric Lindquist. Easy enough. Best of luck this week. See you guys on Sunday.